The year was 1347. Europe was a land trembling between faith and fear. In the Benedictine Abbey of Saint Theobald, perched on a lonely hill above the village of Clairvaux, silence was not just a rule, it was a way of survival. Brother Aelred was unlike the other monks. He had joined the monastery late in life, a man once known for his keen mind, once a scribe in the royal chancery of England. But something had driven him from the world of men into the sanctuary of prayer and silence. The brothers never asked what. Each morning he would walk through the cloister at dawn, counting the stone arches and reciting verses under his breath. He seemed content, yet there was always a flicker of unease in his eyes, as though the quiet walls themselves were keeping a secret. Then, on the morning of March 6th, 1348, Brother Aelred was gone. His cell was perfectly neat, the candle unburned, his robes folded, his prayer book open to the same psalm he had read the night before. The door was locked from the inside. There were no footprints in the corridor, no sign of struggle, and no one had seen him leave. The abbot ordered a fast and a week of prayer, but whispers grew. "Perhaps he was taken," murmured Brother Thomas. "By whom?" another monk asked. "Not by whom," said Thomas, lowering his voice. "By what?" The disappearance of a monk was not unheard of in those times. Wars, wanderings, even madness could explain much. But when night fell and the bell tolled for Compline, strange sounds echoed through the abbey walls, faint chanting, in a voice that was not entirely human.
By the third night after Brother Aelred's disappearance, the Abbey of Saint Theobald was unraveling. Monks who once moved through the cloisters in silence now spoke in hushed tones, breaking centuries of discipline. Some claimed they saw candlelight flicker behind the walls near Aelred's cell, as if a hidden chamber lay beyond the stone. Others swore they heard him whispering prayers in Latin during matins, though the choir stood empty. The abbot, Father Godric, was a stern man, tall, white-bearded, a veteran of the Crusades before he had turned to faith. He forbade all talk of miracles or demons. Yet even he could not ignore what the monastery's youngest novice found that week: a scrap of parchment beneath the flagstones of the scriptorium, sealed in beeswax and marked with Aelred's personal sigil. The parchment contained only a few words, written in Old English that predated the abbey itself. "Seek not the vox silentii, for its echo devours the soul." Father Godric gathered his most trusted brothers that night, Thomas, Oswin, and the infirmarian Brother Hugo, and by candlelight they searched Aelred's cell. Behind a loose stone in the wall, they found a small leather-bound book wrapped in cloth. It was no ordinary prayer book. The cover bore symbols unfamiliar to any monk there: interwoven circles, lines like the orbit of stars, and the faint image of an open eye. Brother Hugo, who had once studied medicine in Paris, whispered, "This is not the work of the Church. These are signs of the ars magica, forbidden study." Father Godric hesitated, but opened the first page. The text was written in both Latin and a strange angular script none could recognize. But one phrase stood out clearly, written in red ink: "The voice of silence is the key to eternity." That night, as rain lashed against the stone walls, Father Godric forbade anyone from touching the book again. But Brother Thomas could not sleep. He had been Aelred's closest companion, and guilt gnawed at him. When the bell struck midnight, Thomas slipped into the abbot's study, stole the manuscript, and lit a candle. He began to read aloud the Latin passages, softly at first, then more urgently. Domine audire silentium, in tenebris loquitur lux. The candle flickered, and a cold draught swept through the room. Thomas felt the air tremble, not with sound, but with its absence. Every noise, the dripping wax, the wind, his own heartbeat, seemed to vanish, leaving only a heavy, suffocating quiet. Then he heard it. A voice, faint and distant, echoing as if from deep underground. "Thomas!" He froze. It was Aelred's voice, weak, desperate. "Do not open the last page." Thomas dropped the candle. The flame died instantly, though no smoke rose. The entire abbey was plunged into a silence so deep it felt alive. The next morning, Father Godric found the study empty. Only the book remained, open to a page none remembered seeing before, inked in fresh crimson. Two have heard the silence. Only one may return. Word spread beyond the abbey walls. The villagers, terrified, refused to approach the monastery at night. By the end of that week, even the bells refused to ring. The iron tongues swung freely, but no sound emerged. The Abbey of Saint Theobald had fallen under a curse, one that began with a monk who vanished overnight. By the time spring rain gave way to summer sun, the Abbey of Saint Theobald had become a shell of its former sanctity. Its gardens grew wild, its fountains ran dry, and its once golden bells hung mute as ghosts. Travelers who passed through the nearby village of Clairvaux spoke of the monks walking in silence, pale as corpses, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Some said they moved only after sunset, guided by candlelight that flickered but never burned. Father Godric, now haggard and haunted, refused to abandon his post. He spent each night inside the abbey library, poring over Aelred's manuscript. His beard had grown unkempt, and his trembling fingers were blackened with ink. He was searching, not for faith, but for the truth. One morning, Brother Oswin found him slumped over the table, muttering to himself, "There is a door beneath the altar, a door of silence." Oswin helped him to his feet. "Father, you must rest. You've not slept in days." Godric's eyes, once fierce and commanding, were glassy. "Aelred was not taken by demons, brother. He found something built before our order existed." That night, Godric gathered the last 6 monks who remained and led them into the chapel. The candles burned low, casting the crucifix in long shadows. He ordered them to remove the altar stone, an act forbidden by centuries of church decree. Beneath it lay not the bones of a saint, as they had been taught, but a stone slab engraved with symbols that matched those on Aelred's book. At its center was a small iron ring. "Help me lift it," Godric commanded. Together they heaved the slab aside. A breath of cold air rushed upward, carrying with it the scent of old dust and something metallic, like blood. A staircase spiraled downward into darkness. Without hesitation, Father Godric took a lantern and descended. The stairs led them deep into the earth, further than the foundations of the abbey should have allowed. The walls were carved smooth, not by human hands, but by some ancient craft. Every few steps, the air grew colder, until their breath turned to mist. At last, they reached a round chamber, its ceiling high and domed, and its floor marked with concentric circles, like ripples in still water. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it a human skull, perfectly preserved, resting atop a slab of black stone. Brother Hugo gasped. This is no Christian tomb." "No," Godric murmured, "it's older." Etched into the stone around the skull were words in the same angular script from Aelred's book. Hugo translated what little he could. "Here lies the voice of silence. He who listens shall hear eternity." A soundless wind brushed through the chamber, not a sound at all, but the absence of it, a pressure that pressed against their ears and hearts. The lantern flame dimmed, though it did not flicker. The air itself seemed to resist motion. Then came the whisper, "You have come too far." The monks froze. The voice was faint, not outside them, but within, as if it rose from their own thoughts. Father Godric fell to his knees. "Aelred, where are you?" The voice trembled like a candle about to die. "I sought knowledge. I opened what should not be opened. The silence feeds upon thought itself." Brother Oswin, trembling, turned to flee, but the stairway had vanished. Where stone steps once rose, there was now only smooth rock. Panic surged through the group. Ugo dropped the lantern, but instead of shattering, it landed without a sound. Its light vanished completely. Darkness. And in that darkness, shapes moved. No one knows exactly what happened in that chamber. Only fragments of what Brother Oswin later wrote survived. A trembling confession found years later inside a sealed reliquary. He wrote that the skull began to glow faintly, as if lit from within. Faces appeared in its hollow sockets, shifting, merging, crying silently. Then the silence itself began to hum, a vibration that could not be heard but felt through the bones. He wrote, "The sound was inside my skull. It was thought becoming voice, and voice becoming nothing." One by one, the monks began to vanish. Not vanish in light or flame, simply fade, as if time forgot them. Their robes crumpled where they stood, but their shadows remained on the floor, burned into the stone, though no light had touched them. Father Godric was the last. Before the silence took him, Oswin heard him whisper, "The voice is not absence, it is hunger." Then there was nothing. 2 centuries later, in 1522, when the abbey was long abandoned and falling to ruin, a group of Franciscan friars came to restore it. They found the upper chambers buried in ivy and bird nests, but the stone altar still intact. When they removed it, they found a narrow crack leading to a deep, airless void. At the bottom lay only dust and an old book, its leather cover cracked, its pages untouched by time. The friars brought it to the Bishop of Metz. Within its pages they found a final entry written in a different hand, clear, steady, and recent compared to the rest. The author identified himself simply as Aelred. The final passage read, "I learned that silence is not the absence of sound. It is a realm, an ancient mind beneath the earth, older than prayer, older than sin. I called to it, and it answered. I write this with what remains of me, though my hands no longer move. Tell them, the voice that speaks without sound still waits beneath Saint Theobald, and when it calls again, the world will forget its own name." The bishop, unnerved, ordered the book sealed within the Vatican archives. The abbey was razed a year later, the stones used to build a small chapel on the same hill, where even now no birds sing and no echoes return when one calls. Centuries passed, but the legend of the monk who vanished overnight never died.
Scholars debated whether it was plague madness, collective hysteria, or the survival of a pre-Christian cult. Yet even in modern times, strange reports continued. In 1896, a French archaeologist named Émile Laurent visited the ruins of Clairvaux Abbey. His journal, recovered after his disappearance, described the same carvings beneath the chapel foundations and a pressure in the air so heavy it silenced my thoughts. His last written words were eerily familiar. "I hear him. Brother Aelred is still praying." No trace of Laurent was ever found. In 1974, local restoration workers digging near the site unearthed several skeletal remains arranged in a circle, robes still clinging to bone. None bore signs of violence or decay, consistent with ordinary burial. Each skull had a faint circular mark burned just above the brow. The discovery was quietly sealed off by the regional authorities. The chapel was reconsecrated, then locked, and the key handed to the diocese with a warning: never open the lower chamber. And yet, on certain windless nights, villagers of Clairvaux still swear they can hear faint chanting rising from beneath the hill. Not in Latin, not in any language known to men. Just a rhythm, soft and hollow, like breath caught between worlds. They call it the whisper of Aelred. Some say it's only the wind. Others say it's the sound of time remembering what humanity tried to forget. But those who've stood close enough to hear it claim something stranger still, that the whisper doesn't enter the ears at all. It enters the mind. And once you've heard it, you never truly hear again.